God is in control. That's my message to you this morning. God is in control. Therefore, you and I have to stress less. Yes, we just cannot avoid being anxious. We cannot avoid being fearful. It's just the human nature. It's the way we as humans are designed to respond to external situations. But we've also got to remind ourselves that despite all our anxiety, despite all our feelings of insecurity, there's someone who is in control of our lives, and that is God. Now, whether you believe in God or not, that's a different thing, because I do know that there are some who do not believe. As a matter of fact, there are many people who believe that there is no God, and that's a good thing. We live in a world now where everyone is their own source of truth. We live in a world where there is simply a belief in oneself, a belief that, yes, I know well for myself. I know what's good for me. You cannot tell me what to do. And so we all leave ourselves on our own, and everyone's going about to do their own thing. But if you take a closer look at people's lives, you will understand that there's so much anxiety, there's so much worry, there's so much hopelessness out there. But we who are the church, our hope is in God. And that message of hope, we've got to keep bringing it out to the world that is out there, because God so loved the world that he gave his son, that no one should perish, but all should have eternal life. Jesus is the hope of the world. And this morning, I'm bringing you a message of hope, a message that will help you to take the pressure off yourself and to cast all your cares and your anxieties to the one who can handle it for you. My text is from the Old Testament book of Exodus. There's the story in Exodus, popular story which you may know, Exodus chapter 14. I'll just give you a bit of context and background to this. This particular period in the world, the children or the people of God, God in his infinite wisdom called the people to himself, and for some reason they went away and became slaves to a particular kingdom at that time. And so Israel was in slavery to Egypt for a period of 400 years. And after those 400 years, God heard their cries through a man called Moses. Many of you may have heard or read about Moses, the great man who parted the Red Sea, the great man who held the rod in his hand and dropped it and it turned into a snake. God did wonderful things through this man called Moses. And so Moses went to the biggest ruler, the greatest ruler in the known world at that time, Egypt, Pharaoh in Egypt, and said to him, God wants you to release his people. And so after a bit of argument, and after a bit of display of God's power, Pharaoh decided to let God's people go. And so they left Egypt that fateful day, and on they went into the desert, into the unknown. But somehow, within a few hours or a few days after Pharaoh had let them go, God decided in his infinite wisdom to change Pharaoh's mind. And so Pharaoh woke up and said, what have I done? Why have I released these people? And thus he put together 600 chariots, the Bible tells us, his soldiers and many horses, and they went after the people of Israel who were on foot in the desert. And that's where Exodus chapter 14 begins. I'll read from verse 5. And when the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them and said, what have we done? That's Exodus chapter 14, verse 5. What have we done? We have let the Israelites go and have lost their service. You see, the Israelites were slaves in Egypt, and so they had let them go, and they had lost the service of this, perhaps 3 million people were told. And so he had his chariots ready and took his army with him. He took 600 of his best chariots, and along with all the other chariots of Egypt, with officials all over them. Verse 8, the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites who were marching out boldly. The Egyptians, all of Pharaoh's horses, chariots, horsemen, and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Phi Harioth, opposite of Baal Zephon. Verse 10, and as Pharaoh approached the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. I want you to picture this scene here. Looking up and seeing terror coming behind you. That's what they saw. Verse 10 says they were terrified and cried out to the Lord. And they said to Moses, was it not because there was no graves in Egypt that you brought us out to the desert to die? What have you done to us to bring us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone? Let us serve the Egyptians. It would have been better for us serving the Egyptians than to die in the desert. These guys, suddenly hope evaporated. Suddenly their enthusiasm for freedom, their vision of the promised land was completely wiped out because of their anxiety and because of their fear. Verse 13, then Moses answered the people and said, do not be afraid. Stand firm, for you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still. Stand firm. The Lord will fight for you, and you need only be still. Stress less. God is in control. I used to live in fear of so many things. Perhaps you have your own anxieties and you have your own fears. One of my own, which I always remember from time past, was that I had the fear that I would run out of money. I could not because once when I was in secondary school, in those days when I was far away from home, I just ran out of money. And for days I was starving in school, waiting for my parents to send money from home. And since then, I made a conscious decision that I would not run out of money. And so I would always keep a healthy reserve of cash. I gave no money to anyone, very stingy, gave no offering in church, and always refused any opportunity to contribute money to any cause, simply because I was afraid of running out of money. If I give this one out, what's going to happen to me? How am I going to live? How am I going to eat? How am I going to feed myself? We all have our own fears. We all have our own bad experiences from the past that is always making us turn our head round to see whether those experiences are going to catch up with us. And so when we enter into situations that seems familiar, but that we think, wait a minute, is this a time where I'm going to run out of money? Is this another time where I'm going to fall sick again? We begin to get anxious. And that's what happened to these guys there. They saw the chariots coming back and they remembered, oh my God, these guys are coming again. But one thing is that God showed up. So bad experiences of the past are always around and they always haunt us. And so we live our lives expecting the worst outcome of every situation. But that's not a good way to live. That's not a healthy way to live, because it simply makes life stressful. It simply makes us anxious and jittery at everything. And so there are a few things I'd like to point out from this story here that can help you elevate your stress levels, that can help you understand that the future is going to be all right. That just because you've always run out of money in the past does not mean that you are going to run out of money in the future. So my first point, this one is that there are things that God can do for you, and there are things that you can do for yourself. And let me tell you, sometimes it's not always so obvious. If we go back to our text here in Exodus 14 and in verse 15, then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on." Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. We who are living today have the benefit of hindsight, but let me help you go back those years to that scene. There's the Red Sea in front, and then there are the chariots coming from the back. Excuse me, God? Where are we going to move to? The front, there is no way. The back, there is danger. Yet, God says, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the children of Israel to move on." And in verse 16, he says, "Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground." One of the things that God can do for you is that he can make a way where there is no way. One of the things that God can do for you is that he can part what seems like a Red Sea. He can make possible what seems like an impossible situation. The writer of Psalm 23 reminds us that though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, every time I read that, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Understand that this guy who wrote this was actually walking through the valley of the shadow of death. That means that there was death on every side. But God says, "I will fear no evil." He knows, because God is with him, his rod and his staff, they comfort him. So there are things God can do for you, and there are things you can do for yourself. You cannot part difficult situations for yourself. So there's no point in worrying about it. You cannot make water come out from a rock. There's no point in worrying about it. But as God says to Israel, you can take the next step forward. You have something in your hand. You can actually pray to God and he can tell you what to do. So it's not that they were crying out to him. It's just the fact that God gave the next instruction, which is that go forward. Now is not the time to be anxious. Now is not the time to be worried. Now is the time to go forward. The psalmist reminds us in Psalm 139, and I want to remind you, 139, Psalm verse 7. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me and your right hand will hold me fast. God is everywhere. Every situation that you are in, every situation that you may find yourself, God is there with you. But you see, you have to know that God is there with you. So while there are things that God can do for you, there are things that you have to do for yourself. God is there with you every step of the way, but you have to know that God is there with you. There's a challenge for many who do not believe in God. There's a challenge, or this presents a challenge to many who believe so much in themselves and that there's no other external body or no work that can help. Only the government or they can help themselves. And if you are stuck in a situation like that, where there's so much distrust of authority because no one trusts the government, and yet we're in a situation where we don't know. That's why you need to put your trust in God. You need to know and understand that there's someone, your maker, who is in control of your life. John chapter 10, I'll not call you John 10, John chapter 10, verse 27, but my sheep listen to my voice. I know them and they follow me. So my question to you again this morning is that, do you know Jesus? Do you follow Jesus? Do you obey his command, his word, or his instructions? Take a few moments to think about that. Because the world that we're living in continues to be so uncertain, continues to be filled with things which we just do not know how they're going to turn out. Ups and downs. One thing we do know, one thing we who know God, who know Jesus know, is that our faith and our trust must be in God, who is in control. And we've read that famous part of the Bible in Philippians 4, chapter 6, in Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. I want to bring you to that again. Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 and 7 says, do not be anxious about anything. That's a bold statement. As humans, we are anxious about everything. And yet, God says, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, we should present our requests to God. And what's he going to do? In verse 7, we read, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. That is the secret of stressing less. The peace of God. Peace, as you know, is not the absence of fear. Peace is not the absence of turmoil. Peace is not the absence of chaos. It just simply means that in the midst of all the troubles, in the midst of things not going right, in the midst of the ups and downs, the peace of God, which transcends all human understanding, will guard your heart and mind. I present that Jesus to you this morning, the author of peace. Do you know him? Because if you do not know him, how can you trust him? Because of television and the media, we seem to think that we know so many people. We look at heads of states from all the other parts of the world. We see them every day, and we make great assumptions that we know them. No, you don't. How can you know someone who you only see on the screen? How can you know someone who you only chat to on your social media feed? No, you don't. You only know that part of that someone. As a matter of fact, I like to say, we know a lot about people, but we do know very few people. Because knowing comes not just from reading about, but from relationship and experience. Yes, you see a lot of people on the TV screen, social media, and we think we know them. No, we don't. We just know about them. Likewise, many think they know Jesus, but without the experience, how can you know? You only know about, you know in the head. That's why his peace cannot rule your heart. That's why you need to move from knowing in the head to having a relationship, to actually experiencing God. In John chapter 14, again in the Bible, Jesus answered and said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. John chapter 14, verse 6. No one comes to the Father except through me. Verse 7 says, if you really know me, you will know my Father as well. For from now on, you do know him and have seen him, simply because you have seen Jesus. Stress less. Jesus is in control. Yes, the uncertainty will continue. Yes, the turmoil will continue. Yes, the fear will always be there because we are humans. Maybe my fear of running out of money will still not go away. But I know that Jesus is in control. As we bow our heads to pray this morning, I want you to do something this morning. Right where you are, take out a piece of paper and just write one thing, one fearful situation that you're facing right now. Take out a piece of paper. Get your pen. Just write for yourself, not for anyone, but for yourself. What is that anxious moment? What is that anxiety? What is that one thing that you're fearful about? When the phone rings, what is that unexpected thing that you're expecting? When the letter comes through the mail, what is that? What stops you from opening the mail? Simply because you're afraid, you're anxious. When you get on the tube to go to work, what is it that makes you afraid of the crowd? When you get to work, what is it about the people you see that makes you anxious? Now I want you to crush that piece of paper and prophetically toss it into the bin. Crush that piece of paper and prophetically toss that fear into the bin. Because what you have just done is that you have put down the baggage of fear, the weight of anxiety. You've put it down, and you can now put your trust in God. Now, that doesn't mean that when you look around, the anxiety will not come back. It will try to come back. But you've got to remind yourself that, no, I have put away fear and I've put my trust in God. I have crushed the fear, and I've put my trust in God. God is the good shepherd. He leads you, he protects, he provides, and he comforts you and I every step of the way. This week, as you go on, stress less, because God is in control. He will lead you through the Red Sea. Whatever situation you're facing, whatever's coming ahead of you, understand that God is in control. I'll leave you with the words of Jesus in Matthew 25. You can read in Matthew 6 from verse 25, you can read the whole thing. Jesus told his disciples that they should not worry about anything. He says in there that all the worry, all the anxiety in the world will change nothing. All of it will change nothing. Simply seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and everything else will fall in place. I present you Jesus, the author and finisher of your faith, the one who is in control, or who can help you control your life, taking the pressure off you so that you can have the life of abundance that he has promised. Stressless. God is in control. God bless you.